All right, do you know what time it is?
It's time to do our Kegels.
It is, and this is the most, in some ways, my favorite part of the show. Because who doesn't want a strong pelvic floor, Twyla?
I think I want one, so I'm good.
Exactly. So this is the time of the show when we do our Kegel exercises. It's so easy. It's so simple and can be so effective and life-changing.
That's right.
And so we are going to go over the customized GynoCast world-renowned regimen.
Okay, you ready?
Yep.
3
times a day.
6
Days a week.
9
seconds per Kegel exercise.
and 12.
Kegels in a row to make a rep. It's so simple. All you have to do is do 12 in a row, 3 times a day, 6 days a week, and hold them for 9 seconds. You will have a pelvic floor like a chain link fence. You will be able to pull a trailer with it. You will be the envy of your neighbors.
I think you will be, that's for sure.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GynoCast. My name is Dr. Eric Kiegard. I am a board-certified, not certifiable,
Okay.
obstetrician gynecologist. I'm here with my buddy, Twyla Dang.
Good morning.
Welcome
How are you?
back.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's nice to see you. Today, we're talking about breastfeeding.
Indeed.
Because don't you think breastfeeding is good?
I mean, I did it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, worked out for me.
I think I was breastfed, but I'm not entirely sure.
I wasn't. I am entirely sure.
Really?
Yeah. We can get into that while we talk today.
How did that conversation...
There were certain points in time at which it was not popular to do that.
Yeah.
And I had a very fun, surreal experience with that whole process where sort of the generation before my generation got to observe me doing it, and it turned into like a whole like National Geographic like anthropology lesson.
Serious? Like they're all sitting around watching?
Quite literally, yes.
Look how that works.
It was kind of hilarious. Yeah, so I'll tell the story. It's good.
Wow. Well, we all know, I think it's a pretty common statement now, and I think we've done better with this in the last generation, that breast is best for babies. There's tons of evidence to show that there are tremendous benefits to babies and moms, actually, for breastfeeding. But you'd be surprised at, given that information, it's still not as pervasive and as supported in many countries as it should be. And actually, a UNICEF report came out recently, which showed that there are many countries, especially in the developed world, that do a terrible job of supporting breastfeeding. And let me just give you a guess of which country was among the top 3.
Us.
You got it.
Darn it.
The United States.
I was hoping it wasn't. I was hoping for once I'd be wrong. I'd say it and you go, no, Canada. I'd be like,
yeah. The Canadians, they're all over breastfeeding.
Yeah.
No, the United States, France, and Ireland have the lowest rates of breastfeeding among the developed world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you see this again, I don't mean to make too much of a point here, but we spend the most per capita for healthcare dollars than any country in the world. And yet, when you look at metrics in terms of health for babies, etc., we're among the worst of the developed world. And we spend the most, and we have the worst results. And
I'm actually pretty shocked by that, but then again, I'm not, because even though we spend the most per capita on healthcare, it's not surprising because we are one of the worst countries in terms of support for particularly like working mothers.
That's right.
And working families. And I think those two things absolutely go hand in hand with sort of the ability to breastfeed, the ease and comfort of breastfeeding, the access to breastfeeding. I think all of those things kind of play in.
I think you just nailed it there. And this report showed that 1 in 5 babies in these countries is never breastfed at all.
Wow.
And that contrasts to other countries where virtually, almost 100% are breastfed.
Mm-hmm.
And you can understand, I think, that that there are countries in the world where if they have endemic poverty, if they don't have access to fresh water and clean water, there's going to be much more incentive to breastfeed your baby because you need to give them healthy nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely.
But here in the United States and in developed countries, we have this. We have the option of formula versus breast milk, and so it kind of follows down that the aspect in terms of safe water, for example, is not as big of a deal, and so it goes to more convenience. But we have the information which seems to show again and again and again the multiple benefits of breastfeeding. And I think it shows, in essence, some of the problems that you brought up, Twyla, is that we don't support women who are breastfeeding in this country.
Absolutely.
And and for a number of reasons. And you brought that up. Number one is that it can be inconvenient if you are working to have to go out and, well, number one, your baby may not be with you, but even if you are pumping, it can be, the company needs to, the workplace needs to support that.
Right, and that's difficult a lot of the time. I mean, just some of the sort of mild issues that I've seen my friends go through, and in terms of being able to breastfeed at work, providing a safe, clean place for them to breastfeed.
Right.
Providing a place, providing enough discretion for milk storage so that it doesn't become this awkward thing at a workplace.
Right.
Not being stigmatized by other employees or supervisors when you have to stop to go breastfeed. Having a certain level of respectful air around the concept of breastfeeding. Like there are places that provide the space that tell you can go do it, but there's also an understanding that if you do it, you'll kind of be frowned upon.
Yeah.
You're taken away from your workday, or you're expected to somehow make up that particular 20 minutes in some sort of very specific fashion to show, like really physically show a supervisor that you're not wasting time, when really you're doing something that is a very specific activity under very specific conditions, and that you are probably more productive, hyper-productive, because you know you have to take that time away to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not, and there's such a strange stigma around, even doing it. The decision to do it is even difficult. I know a lot of working women that by the time they go back to work, they just stop doing it because it's too much. It's too much of a stressor on top of going back to work and being away from your baby for an extended period of time, and what's happening in daycare and everything else, that you just kind of go, there's things I can control, this I can't control, so I'm just going to stop doing it.
That's right. And so how do we change the paradigm for this, Twyla? I'm going to the bigger picture right now, the 1,000-foot view, because it comes down, I think, primarily to support. You just mentioned that.
Yeah.
Plus the fact that we have just sexualized breasts, and so as opposed to...
Okay, listen, and that is in and of itself a huge piece of this. I did not breastfeed at work. That wasn't, I actually was fortunate enough that I wasn't working at the time my children were small enough to do that. But I did on many occasions have to breastfeed in public. I had a hungry child. That was their only source of nutrition. And I don't send me emails about like, oh, if your kid was 4, if your kid is 5. I'm not getting into that. That is a whole different spectrum in terms of breastfeeding and the link of where we're going with this.
Right.
But when I had very small children and I was in public places, I had many a time where the attempt to cover and do all of this stuff made it 50 times harder to breastfeed. No, I live in Minnesota, so no, the option of going and sitting in my car in the middle of winter wasn't an option. I remember being, sort of slightly accosted by store workers, where if I'm stuck in like a department store and my child needs to nurse, I would just try to duck into a dressing room. And the thing is, I would be really upfront about it. I wouldn't just like grab a shirt and pretend to try it on and nurse my kid. I would tell them, I actually need to just duck into your dressing room for a couple of minutes to nurse my baby. Yeah. Is that okay? And I can't tell you how many times I was told, no, that's not okay. No, they're not comfortable with it. There's a bathroom you can use. Would you nurse your baby in a public bathroom?
I'd rather not.
Thank you. And I don't care if you...
That's the first time anybody's ever asked me that question.
Yeah, but see, I get...
the first time I ever really thought about
it. But I've been directed, quote unquote, to public bathrooms on more occasions than I care to admit. I even, and at least I had my babies in the early 2000s, when all of the fun little like aprons that you're supposed to put over your head and cover your kid and blah blah blah, so you could do this with discretion in public if you needed to. Even with those, I can't tell you how many nasty looks, weird looks, people thinking that they had some sort of right or responsibility to tell me that it's not appropriate to do that here.
Odd, isn't it?
And there's the thing. A lot of women who go through that are shamed so much that they just won't take their babies out in public to do stuff like that. If you know anything about me, if you've even met me or if you've listened to this for a while, you know I'm not really one to suffer fools. So the second you come up and decide to tell me how to actually care for my baby and what's appropriate, one or two things are going to happen. You're getting cussed out, or I was just going to take the apron off altogether and just nurse them open because you weren't going to really get the win.
Just the way God made you.
Hey, listen. Nobody asked you. You could have mind your business.
You were the one who was talking about the National Geographic.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
just let it all. I love it.
listen, it just is what it is. But that's an overall cultural stigma.
Yeah.
Like, and you're absolutely right. The fact that we've sexualized a practice that has gone on for thousands of years in order to nurture human life, and now we have reduced it to you shouldn't bare your breast in public. I'm not flashing them for cash. I'm nursing a kid. And even when you're nursing a kid, even under the best of conditions, the most you might be seeing is maybe a 1 by 2 inch section of my breast with my kid's mouth wrapped around a nipple. Seriously? What does that say about you?
Yeah,
that
right.
you're getting all hot and bothered about like seeing a 2 inch cross section of my boob.
Yeah, right.
Calm down.
It is just astonishing to me, especially since I think we all know, and unless you are really just living in a cave with your head, not only in a cave, but you've dug a hole and put your head in the ground in your cave, we have all heard about the benefits of breastfeeding and the importance in terms of not just health, but emotional bonding with the baby, etc. And so why do we make it so dang hard for people to take care of our babies? Why?
Because honestly, I read this in a Time magazine, had to be about 15, 16 years ago now, maybe longer. It was an editorial, and it said, we're a country that says we love children, but we secretly hate them. And it said that and it talked about all the small ways that we legislate against families and legislate against working parents and legislate against children and the things that we invest in versus the things that we say we should invest in. And we're still having these debates today about, we should have safe schools and good education, but we're somewhere like in 78th in the world in terms of, educational leaders for children, and we're even worse in terms of safety of children.
Yeah.
We don't actively walk the talk when it comes to caring for children, and that extends all the way into legally and socially protecting those who care for children. We don't hold any of these institutions to a certain standard, and that makes it that much more difficult for people who choose to have children to be able to take care of them in a way that would be not just supportive of their family, but supportive of society as a whole. When you allow children to suffer in any form or fashion, you will pay for it. And we kind of see that play out every day.
Well, exactly. The perfect example is just how we will avoid spending money on the front side, and yet we spend gazillions of dollars with people in prison.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't take care of them on the front side, they're going to end up as wards of the state.
Exactly.
Perhaps.
Exactly.
So let me give you some examples of some of the advantages of breastfeeding.
Okay.
And some of them are very well understood and well documented. Others, they start to get a little bit out there. There's not as much support for them. But so, when a baby is born, their immune system is virtually completely naive, and they don't. Virtually all the antibodies they've gotten have been through the mother's blood when they were inside the womb.
Mm-hmm.
Their guts really don't have anything in them. Our guts, as we continue to learn, the microbiome of our GI tract is very complex, and there's this symbiotic relationship between the good bacteria that are in there that we are finding more and more and more has incredible benefits and is almost like another organ in and of itself. And so breast milk is perfectly balanced and basically designed to help coat the baby's gut with good bacteria.
Can I ask you a question?
No.
It's one of those questions where it comes up.
Course.
It always comes up whenever somebody winds up talking about breastfeeding. What exactly is breast milk? Like, what is it made out of? Because that becomes the eternal debate of like what is in it. And then if you're willing to admit this to yourself and you have somebody that's done this in the family, there's always the debate where somebody asks you, like, did you taste it? Did you try it?
Yeah. Did you?
Yeah, of course
What
I
did
did.
it taste like?
I made milk. Of course I was going to try it.
Well,
It's amazing.
Now I'm just thinking, why didn't I taste it? I haven't tasted it.
I had to know. I had to know. It's actually very thin. It's kind of watery. It reminded me in taste of like the flavor of it reminded me of cantaloupe. I drank like a teaspoon.
Really?
Cantaloupe. After
Had you been eating a lot of cantaloupe?
No. So
Right.
I have been told, like we learned the whole thing. We'll probably get into this later about the weird things and get into your breast milk. But I tried to avoid a lot of stuff because I was worried about it like getting passed through.
Yeah.
But
I wonder, is that kind of a universal description? Have you heard other people describe it?
I've heard a lot of people saying it's
cantaloupe
very
or-
thin, like, and watery in taste. But other people, I think, just depending on your taste buds, you got a different impression. I think almost everybody I've talked to about it said it had some sort of vague, like,
melon
lightness
flavor.
or fruit flavor, like a mild flavor to it. Not there. I haven't had encounter anybody who's like, oh yeah, it reminded me of milk. Nobody said that.
Isn't it interesting that it's got a melon flavor?
But I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. It might just be where we live. It just might be us. People in California get something different. People in New York get something different.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, it's
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail your thought, but
That's-
that's always come up. Like, yeah.
breast milk is a complex formula of good carbohydrates and proteins and fats, including antibodies and good bacteria. How do you like that?
I do. That makes sense.
I just pulled that out of nowhere.
Well, no, but that's. But that's a really because that's actually
what it is.
Well, you know what? But that's one of the questions nobody ever ansers. Like when
you could have let me know you were going to ask me that, so I could.
Sorry, it's really like even in all these years, like my kids are now well beyond this. But even when I decided early on I was going to attempt to breastfeed, I never actually thought to ask the question of what's in it, like what makes it. It was just, and this is kind of like how we always hear when medical people say, this is good for you, you should do it. You just go, okay, it's good for me, I should do it.
Yeah, right. Well, the interesting thing, as we learn more and more in modern times about this idea of the microbiome, it's just fascinating. And there are studies that show that babies that are born vaginally have a different microbiome than those that are born via C-section.
Really?
Right. And so there have been some places where they've tried actually, and this is not recommended. I will tell you this right now. Do not do this.
Don't do this.
But people have there have been some people who've tried to take actually babies that are born by C-section and take some vaginal drainage or discharge and actually put it in the baby's mouth and nose to try to replicate.
To recreate it?
Yeah, and there's unfortunately been some babies that have actually died from infection from this.
No.
So the best laid
don't
plans,
do that.
there's and so until we really understand how this works, don't do things like that.
Yeah, there's no need.
I can understand the idea, but sometimes it doesn't work out the way people want it to.
Yeah, don't.
But we don't, because we just don't know enough about this beyond the fact that it appears that it's pretty well accepted that there is a difference in the exposure of the baby to some of these, the bacteria, good bacteria, etc.
Right.
And so the breast milk has, is perfectly designed. It coats the gut and provides good bacteria and antibodies and immune cells, and that you can't get from bottle or formula. And there's a very interesting, if you ever want to read something kind of dark and interesting, is look in the history of breast or formula and how it was really pushed by certain companies in areas with endemic poverty, lack of access to clean water, and people are vulnerable. They want to take good as good care of their babies as they can, and so when you have people telling you that breast or bottled milk or formula is better, there's a lot of power behind that. This has been going on for generations, where you had people who didn't even have access to clean water that were using unclean water to mix with formula, and that's kind of a dark story of corporate.
Not surprised.
I don't want to get too deep in.
Yeah,
there.
no, but we'll put some stuff in the syllabus.
Yeah, it's that's dark.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And so it's perfectly formulated, and the benefits. Okay, so let me go through this. You ready for this, Twyla?
Indeed.
And these are the things that we know about that breastfed babies have: stronger immune systems. They tend to have less diarrhea, constipation, and basically gut issues. And in preterm babies, less necrotizing enterocolitis, which is a real issue with preterm babies, where their parts of the bowel can actually start to die off, which is not good. They tend to have fewer colds and respiratory illnesses like pneumonia and respiratory syncytial virus and whooping cough. They have fewer ear infections, especially those that can damage hearing. There are fewer cases of bacterial meningitis. There's a suggestion of better vision and less what they call retinopathy of prematurity. So babies that are born premature can have trouble with their guts, as we talked about, necrotizing enterocolitis, and they also can have problems with their eyes. And so these breastfed babies tend to have lower rates in this. Lower rates of infant mortality, lower rates of sudden infant death syndrome, and to kind of sum it up, less illness overall and less hospitalization. Parents have up to 6 times less absenteeism from work if they can breastfeed. So that's good. Breast milk provides abundant and easily absorbed nutritional components, antioxidants, enzymes, immune properties, and live antibodies from the mother. And so it just goes on again and again and again. And those are the ones that are really well documented.
Right.
And here are some of the things that may, so there's less studies to support this, but there appears to be some evidence, fewer instances of allergies, eczema, and asthma.
I'm going to call a little bit of shenanigans on
Are
that.
you really?
Yeah, because
Twyla.
I did it exclusively for a good clip of time, and none of that helped my kids. I think sometimes if it runs in your family, it just runs in your family.
Yeah.
And all of my kids, I mean, my oldest suffered, just suffered with all of those things. And I even did the whole clean living on the front end. Like I didn't take in caffeine when I was pregnant, kept very low sugar, didn't eat junk food, only ate super healthy. And that poor kid just got the silver bullet of all the bad skin things you could get all at once.
All right. Well, you have to, as well, you cannot make a generalized statement or an N of 1.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just gonna say from personal experience, I purposefully followed a lot of this hoping that it would help, given sort of what we were seeing and reading statistically.
Yeah.
And I just happened to be on the other end of girl, that didn't help you. So I mean, I'm not saying it can't. I'm sure it can for some. But I probably think because it's sort of a less.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So
I think it's probably one of those it's still a better benefit than doing something else. But if you have sort of family history of it, or you have it yourself, the likelihood is it might
it's
not
still
be.
there. It's not going to be a cure-all.
Exactly.
So there is some suggestion again that it may decrease the risk of some cancers, including leukemia and lymphomas, lower risk of type 1 and type 2 diabetes, lower instances of Crohn's disease and colitis, which is inflammatory bowel disease, lower rates of respiratory illnesses. Now this is where it starts getting fewer speech and orthodontic problems, fewer cavities, less likelihood of becoming obese in later childhood. And this is fascinating. Improved brain.
It is. Are they doing studies? I mean, are people actively studying these now? Because these are the kind of things I'd actually want to know about.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, this whole area of the impact of, again, this idea of how our bodies are, and this goes back to the history of antibiotics and this complicated relationship we have with bacteria and microorganisms. And around World War II and actually in the early part of the 20th century, as we learn more about bacteria and the relationship of bacteria and microorganisms to disease, we actively as a country and as a culture began to try to sterilize things as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only been in recent decades that we've started to realize that there's more things that aren't us than are us in our bodies.
Right.
Which is a fascinating idea that there's, we have blank numbers of cells in our bodies, and we have 5 blank numbers of microorganisms living on our skin and in our mouths and in our noses and in our colons and in our vaginas that are keeping us the way we are supposed to be in this beautifully balanced symbiotic relationship. That's amazing. Now, you may have read on the GynoCast Facebook group, if you follow that, a situation where a woman put a potato in her vagina as a form of contraception. Now, that's an interesting attempt at symbiosis that is not a good idea. She did it. This was a report of a woman who was down in Colombia, or I think it was Colombia, who was, because she did not have access to good and effective and inexpensive contraception. I had heard about putting a potato in her vagina, which I imagine could work, especially depending on the size of the potato.
No, don't even give somebody that. Don't.
Well, if you can't get into the tunnel, you're not going to go through the tunnel, right? If there's a truck in the way,
just put a sign outside tunnel's closed. Just don't. If the option is a potato, if the option is a potato, don't do it. Just don't do it.
So the point is that just to kind of tie a little ribbon on the story, go to the GynoCast Facebook group. But the potato started growing.
As they want to do in cool, moist, dark places.
Yeah, it's just, but it's a fact. Can you imagine? And and I think, wow, I thought, what an interesting idea. And we don't have. I actually made this comment, and kind of tongue in cheek, but the idea that you no longer have to say I really love to garden. You can be the garden, Twyla. We could ideally. Our armpits are nice and moist. Maybe we could put some root vegetables in there. Just okay. Listen, I can't even put a finer point on this. Just don't put potatoes in there. Just don't do it. I think human beings are just amazingly.
We're wild and
wondrous creatures.
Yeah, we are. We're wild and wondrous. Also, sometimes a little bit off kilter.
Well, but again, and there's a funny kind of aspect of just human behavior there, but also the sad and tragic aspect of women who, for many reasons may need to control their bodies and don't have access to good contraception.
Absolutely.
We have a debate about abortion in this country that goes on and on and on, and people have justifiable and very strong feelings on either side. Well, how about we try to make it so women don't get pregnant if they don't want to? How about that?
Well,
that's a story for another time.
Isn't it, though? Because we get into it when we do it.
Support for the GynoCast is provided by OBGYN West. OBGYN West provides the highest quality care from compassionate providers, including women's health issues from general sexual health to pregnancy care, childbirth, menopause, and beyond. Whether it's your teen's first annual exam, a new baby's on the way, or you're facing the special challenges of middle age, OBGYN West provides a wide array of services. Their doctors and PAs are trained in virtually every type of OBGYN service and procedure. OBGYN West provides exceptional care for women.
So breastfeeding, and you also look at benefits for the mom.
Yeah.
There's well-documented decreased risks of breast cancer, uterine cancer, perhaps ovarian cancer. There's less, and we talk about endometriosis on the show all the time. I'm not going to go into that right now, but that can help with symptoms of endometriosis. There appears to be less osteoporosis, less diabetes, less hypertension. It also, helps in terms of emotionally with mother-baby bonding and that sense of intimacy that families need.
Also promotes weight loss.
I was going to get to that. You're dang right, because breastfeeding consumes somewhere, I believe, at least 500 calories a day, up to 1,000.
I can tell you this from personal experience. I was a lazy lump almost my entire pregnancy. Pretty lazy lump after my pregnancy.
You were a lazy lump?
Yeah, just because the nature of having growing an actual human, and I happen to come from the fortunate stock that we gain a lot of weight no matter what we do, and we just push out these little 6-pound babies, and then the other 60-some pounds.
So you just feel like, well, what's the point? So you're just
no. I mean, I actively tried. It just didn't. I really physically just couldn't do a whole lot about the weight. It just sort of kept coming. No matter how healthy or well I did things, it just kept coming. And with each of my kids, I breastfed exclusively for the first 6 months.
Yep.
And then with my later 2 children, I was able to breastfeed for 8 months and up to a year, sort of intermittently while they were getting introduced to food. And all 3 kids, I gained 60 pounds, 62, 64 with each. So those are the 3.
Yeah.
And then
So
I lost all of the weight after each of the kids, solely, really, truly solely from the exertion of breastfeeding, because I didn't have the energy to do anything else.
Well, it's interesting because, again, you can go to some of our other podcasts to talk about this, but weight gain in pregnancy is fascinating because it sort of it has something to do with your kind of underlying weight to begin with. So,
right.
If you are heavy, heavy women tend to gain less weight in terms of percentage, whereas if you're really, really thin, they tend to gain more.
Well, I wasn't really thin. I just put it on.
Okay.
It's just like,
well,
okay.
I'll never forget this. I had a patient who's a model, and she was thin and she was tall and she was thin. And her, she was like 100 pounds and 5'8". And she was, like
oh, wow.
all our, our model types. She gained 100 pounds.
Whoa.
And we saw during her pregnancy, we kind of looked at this with, open mouth awe as the weight just packed on. And
wow.
and she was trying to be healthy. It's just her body was too thin to begin with. 100 pounds, Twyla.
Yeah, that's
oh my
a lot.
God.
I mean, I literally, by the time we got to the end of my first pregnancy, and I realized I had never been this big in my entire life, and I put on a full 60 pounds, and was just sort of like in this weird daze of like, I can't. Am I always? Is this permanent? Am I going to just be this big?
Yeah.
And I remember the doctor being like, "No, you know, like once you hit a certain point, you can be cleared for exercise and all this other good stuff." And I said I never had a baby before, so I didn't know anything of what the process would be like. And all I did for 4 months straight was nurse a baby every hour and 40 minutes round the clock. That kid ate like nobody's business. I couldn't take in calories fast enough to keep up with him. And by the time I hit the 4th month, I was down. I only had 15 pounds left of the baby weight on me. And that was really only eating, sleeping, nursing. That's all I had the chance to do.
Yeah.
So I fully believe it. Like if you're doing it, it is an exertion, and you do have to take care of yourself. Like you have to. You
got to get adequate nutrition.
Yeah, yourself. I mean, you have to get adequate rest, adequate nutrition, because if you don't, then everything really does go sideways. Because I've dealt with some of that stuff too.
So. Other interesting things about breastfeeding is that, especially if you haven't had a baby before, it's your first baby, many of us are surprised at how kind of, I don't know if unintuitive the word is, but it's actually kind of complicated.
Yes. And
the baby needs to learn how to do it, and the mom needs to learn how to do it.
Yes.
Breast milk doesn't really come in for several days afterwards, and there is some milk-like substance that has a lot of nutritional and immune.
That's you're talking about colostrum.
Colostrum, exactly. And but the real breast milk for most women doesn't come in for a few days, and they're kind of stumbling back and forth, and feeling like they're spending 24 hours a day doing this, which just leads to the question is the importance of support for women who are breastfeeding.
Yes, absolutely, 1,000%. I think. When you start doing this, if you've never had a baby before, and some of you listening, this will be your first experience with it, the most important thing I can tell you is to be patient and kind to yourself, because you will have no idea what you're doing. You will have no idea how to negotiate your body at a size that's never been, breasts at a size they've never been.
Yep.
Trying to learn how to negotiate and take care of and mind a baby while you're doing this. I mean, I literally had to figure out how to breastfeed blind because my chest was so large and my baby was so small that I couldn't physically hold him and have him latch on at the same time. I couldn't see him. So I was paranoid that I was going to suffocate him every time I tried to nurse him.
Right.
And these are the kind of things where you will get in your head and you still have hormones going on, and your body is still only days out from feeling like you got hit by a truck to an extent.
That's right.
And all of those things swirling together will leave you very vulnerable to two things. One, beating yourself up continuously. And two, being a little too open to people who just don't want to see you struggle, who may make the quote-unquote friendly suggestion that maybe you should give them a bottle.
Right.
And that is a very common thing that happens, especially if you're starting to get frustrated, you can't seem to calm down. And the thing is, if you're not calm, it makes it even harder to let down milk. It makes it even harder to nurse a baby. It makes it harder for the baby to latch. All of these things are stressors. You have to be patient and calm with yourself. You have to be able to, a certain extent, laugh at the absurdity of it all. I mean, it's absurd to be sitting in a hospital room with a baby when 2 days before you were, just waddling around waiting to see your feet again. You know, it's absurd to be at home at 2 and 3 in the morning and trying to figure out how to get this human who you might not have even named yet because it's all just so overwhelming, how to make sure that, you feed them so they can survive. I mean, there's a strange absurdity to all of it that you just have to sort of embrace and sometimes laugh at and sometimes cry through. But through all of it, be able to say, it's gonna be okay. Like, people did this well before I ever got here.
That's right.
And women will do this well after me. It'll be okay.
It comes back to the whole idea that we're talking about really is support. I need support from the beginning, and in all hospitals or birth centers, there are lactation specialists that help women with their babies right away.
That's actually a pretty, is it my opinion or my understanding, is that more of a newer practice? I don't feel like that's always been something.
It's been around for as long as I've been in practice.
Okay, so
20 years
20
or so.
years or so. Okay.
But, you know, we need women need support at the time of delivery and after delivery, and obviously if they want to, as we're talking about the importance of support in the workplace and in public to allow women to nurse their babies. The great thing is, again, in hospitals or birthing centers, there's going to be lactation consultants, and pediatric clinics virtually all have lactation support there as well. Now, the reality is that not every situation works. I mean, there are situations where babies just they don't get it.
Yeah.
And there are situations where women don't produce enough milk, and that's the reality. And so we have to supplement and sometimes switch to formula, and thank God it's there. And, you know, we've got millions and millions of people who've done just fine being formula fed.
Right. But I think that's an important distinction when you say people need support, to be able to have someone in place or an organization or something you can connect to, that if it comes to that, like whether it's going really successfully for you or whether you're struggling with it or whether it's not really an option for you, that you have someone there that says it's okay to do what's best for your family, your baby, in your situation.
That's right.
So having access to like lactation consultants at hospitals, having access to maybe a lactation consultant through your doctor's office. I know a lot of local organizations. There are ECFEs in places around the country. We happen to live in a state with a great ECFE system, and that stands for Early Childhood Family Education. So we're essentially the organizations that run preschools and young childhood classes also run classes that are supportive of new mothers, new fathers, new parents, in some cases single parents, you know, where they have resources where you can get information and people you can talk to and groups you can join where people are going through what you're going through. I know from probably the very first second I found out I was pregnant, I started to get information from La Leche League. Which is an organization that is really their focus is helping you breastfeed your baby. Like they're a supportive organization. They're a national organization that helps provide support for women that are breastfeeding.
Yep.
And having those as an option is really important because you absolutely don't know what path you're going to wind up on. You just don't know. Ideally, you hope there's a path you wind up on, and then you have your baby and reality sets in, and then it turns out to be this is what you get. Sometimes you nurse really well and successfully. Sometimes you have struggles like mastitis that, you know, make it difficult, or you're not producing enough milk, or your baby has. I mean, I've actually met people whose their baby had sort of an allergic reaction to their milk, and then they couldn't do it. You know, so I mean, there's all different kinds of scenarios that could play out, and having the support of organizations like that, and even more so, having the support of family and friends. Like if you're really vocal and really upfront and tell people, like, this is our ambition. Our ambition is to do this.
Yep.
It would be really great if we could do this, like, and making sure that that's really well communicated and understood. And here's the dirty secret that I'm going to put out there.
Oh boy.
When you're doing this, when you decide to breastfeed, it's a very personal decision. It is something that you tend to discuss with your partner if you have a partner. And there's a lot of like sort of going back and forth of how it's going to get done and what you're going to do and how it's going to work. But ultimately, you wind up sort of taking it on very much like we moms do in super mom mode, where we go, I have to handle it. I have to do it. It's all on me. If it's not working, it's all my fault.
Right.
You kind of need to, one, open up and let go of that a little bit and let your partner support you. And not just in the kind of get you a glass of water, I can sit here with you kind of way, but you need to deputize and sort of authorize your spouse to speak for you in these instances. I know when I was in the hospital, I was exhausted all of the time. And I was having difficulty at first, you know, getting my son to latch. And having the nurse come in and say to me when I'm clearly dazed and clearly out of it, well, maybe we'll just give him a bottle this time. And having my husband there to say, no, this is what my wife has decided. This is what we've said we're going to do. we need support to do that. If we try this a couple more times and it's not working, we'll have a conversation. We'll get back to you. But we don't want that as a part of the narrative right now. You're just stressing her out. Leave it be. Having him be able to say to well-meaning family members and friends, this is what we're doing right now. This is what this is how it works for us right now. Is really important. That level of support needs to sort of be baked into your process so that when you do get into the weeds of it, you don't have to feel like you're fighting everybody on every front because you've had these discussions.
Well, what I'm hearing is actually one of the other things I was going to bring up, which is this idea of, we've all heard this, it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
And no time in history have we been so isolated in terms of taking care of our babies and our families. I mean,
absolutely.
Historically, for the whole history of humankind, there have been babies and mothers who had trouble nursing, and in the worst case scenarios, the babies would die. Historically, well, but in most of the time, there were always other mothers who were nursing their babies. There was always a lactating mother around in your village or in whatever, and historically, mothers would take care of each other's babies for whatever reason. If one mother was having trouble nursing her baby, there would be other women who are actively lactating at that time to be helpful, and that's just the very beginning,
right?
But the whole idea of raising our children as a group and not just sitting in your own house in your own bedroom all alone, trying to do this stuff. Yeah,
well, actually, that's funny because that kind of brings me to the story that I mentioned at the beginning, which is I actually live very far away from my family members. I live at least a 3-hour plane ride from my nearest blood relatives.
Yeah.
I live at least at the time at least a 2.5-hour drive from my in-laws. So it was just me and my husband. We had our circle of friends, like the family that you choose, that were around, but we didn't have blood relatives around. So a lot of these discussions that you normally have, sort of as you're in the lead up, we didn't wind up really having, with our family members. So we had made arrangements to take my son to meet my family about a month after he was born. Like when he was cleared to fly, we went down. Spent a couple weeks. And so my son needed to eat. I was in my parents' house. It was my mother's house. And I was there. My mother was there. My sisters were there. And my grandma. And I went in the living room. I tried to be discreet. And the kitchen in our house is the gathering place. Everybody comes into the kitchen, hangs out in there. I went into the living room thinking I'll get a little quiet space. I had this beautiful hand-knit blanket that my friend's daughter made for me that was just gorgeous, and she wanted to make something for the baby. And I used it for nursing. It was perfect size, wasn't too warm. He could nuzzle up under there, and he could handle his business. So I'm thinking I'm in the corner, I'm being all discreet. I have my little glass of water because I used to have to sort of pound a good 8 ounces of water while I was nursing. And one by one, the female relatives start peeking around. They start peeking around the corner like, well, where'd Twyla? Oh, well, where's she? What are you doing? And then, as I kid you not, I look up at one point because I was usually pretty once he was latched and I was chilling out, I would just kind of lean back on the couch and close my eyes and just okay, I'm just going to take a respite because I'm exhausted all the time. I look up, both of my sisters, my mom, my niece, all sitting, all staring at me. All of them. And I'm like, what's going on? And my mom is like, what? How are you doing that? And I'm like, what do you mean how are you doing that? It's breastfeeding. And she's like, exactly. I never did that. And I'm like, seriously? And here's the thing. The only reason I breastfed is because I assumed that my family all breastfed.
All right.
So when my mother said that to me, I went, what are you talking about? Of course you did that. You did that. That's why I'm doing it. She goes, girl, I didn't do that. I had babies when I first started having babies. It was the 60s. Only poor people did that. Right. And so that was her thing. And then she had essentially told my older sister who had a daughter, we don't do that. Yeah. There's no need. Right. So they were fascinated. They were just like, well, how is he holding on? Well, how much does he drink? Well, what happens to the other side? Does he have to use both sides right now? Well, what do you do with the milk he doesn't drink? Well, wait a minute. What if he's not hungry and you're just full? Where's that go? It was we literally had a whole sort of cultural anthropology lesson about modern day breastfeeding. Yeah. And I was stunned that I never actually asked that question of my family and that it was so sort of understood that we just don't do that.
Yeah.
You know, so I was amazed by it. Those are part of those sort of conversations you just don't always think to have. And when you're isolated and you're not with each other every day, it would never come up. If
Right.
my mom lived within a couple blocks, she'd have been with me all the time, and she'd have seen me go buy the breast pump and do all this stuff, and it would have been a discussion. But because she was a phone call away and we were only really checking in once a week, you know, we weren't. I had more important things to talk about than breastfeeding when she would call once a week. I'd be like, "Are these stretch marks forever? Am I gonna? Is it really like a watermelon like passing through your body? Like, help me."
But it just goes to show you that there's this, you know, that we have been given this message for generations. Really,
Absolutely.
that it's, you know, that formula is better, and it's poor people that you know, that breastfeed. This is for, you know, and it's terrible. It's tragic.
It is. I mean, I'm glad that the pendulum is swinging back, and we're getting more of an understanding that, you know, you have choices and that this is a great option if you can exercise it.
That's right.
But it was, I found myself always.
You could have had your own channel, like a cable channel, you know, where people could just watch you breastfeed.
Well, I mean, given the
You
nature
missed
of the
it. It's a
internet
missed
today, I
opportunity.
could have been really wealthy.
Yeah, right.
So listen, seriously, sidebar, because somebody just sent me this the other day. There is a woman who is disabled. She can't work. So she started making videos on YouTube of her chewing things, like doing the oral fixation thing, like the sound thing where it's calming to people to hear people like doing things like chewing. So she has an entire YouTube channel where all she does is chew things that are loud, like pickles and celery and carrots. And yeah, that's all she does all day.
There's a
And
hat for
she-
every head,
Isn't there? So I'm like, you're
A
right.
hand
When
for
you
every
so
glove.
when you say
is
that,
just the weirdest thing I've ever
yeah.
heard in
So
my
when
life,
you
really.
say that, it's like, wow, I miss my calling. My kids could have went to college.
That's right. That's right. Well, and you know, there are some people who should not breastfeed. You know, that
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
for example, and these are more issues of at least from what we know, at least the modern day. But you know, women with HIV, that's, you know, you can pass HIV through the breast milk, tuberculosis, and there are some other very rare kind of issues in terms of the baby and the mom, medical conditions, but those are very rare. And of course, as we talked about before in other shows, and you have to be careful what medications you're taking, and those you need to discuss those with your doctors, the pediatricians, and your obstetricians. How long do you breastfeed? Well, the American Association of Academy of Pediatrics and the World Health Organization, et cetera, all suggest at minimum 6 months, and then you transition with feeding and adding on other foods. But so we're trying to talk about just on this show. We're just talking about support. We certainly don't want to shame women and families who decide that it's not right for them. That's not the point of this.
Well, and you know what? I think that's a really good sort of bell to keep ringing. Is you make the choices that are best for your family.
That's right.
You make the choices that are best for your family, and that means people should respect your choices. But in turn, because this is something that women do to other women quite often, that I'm trying desperately to start changing the narrative on. Don't judge my choices. I promise I will do my best not to judge yours. If somebody's doing it differently, if somebody's doing it in a way that you just wouldn't do, it's not your place to be like, well, you know, you should do this.
Yep.
If someone solicits advice, then give it. Don't give unsolicited opinion. Don't shame each other for making other choices, because you never know what's really going on in somebody's life. You may see a woman that says, oh, I scheduled my C-section and I'm not nursing, and then you're sitting over here judging it like, how dare you? But really, you don't have any idea what's going on.
That's
She
right.
may have medical history that keeps her from being able to have a vaginal birth. She may have other issues, or she may be on some sort of long-term medication that she knows won't allow her to breastfeed. But that's not
right.
necessarily your business. So it's not your business to judge it. It's only your business to go, hey, if that works for you and your family, I hope your baby's healthy. Good for you. Good
That's
luck.
right.
And be supportive of one another. Listen, we already have the deck stacked against us on a daily basis. We're women,
That's
right? We have the deck stacked against us all the time. Why will we go out of our way to make it harder for other women to go through and get through the process of bringing a child into the world and raising a child? Don't do that. We're better than that.
That's right. Good conversation, Twyla Dang.
Indeed.
If-
And we'll have to circle around and circle back and have another extended conversation about breastfeeding, because there's all kind of sort of
There really is.
issues that wrap around
you
it
could
as
really
well.
dive into this.
Absolutely.
If you're not a member of the GynoCast Facebook group, please join. It's a world of wonder.
World of Wonder.
And
I
it's
like it. It's easy to join. Go to Facebook, look up
Exactly.
the GynoCast, and request to be a member. It is a closed group. We have very specific conversations. Our members sometimes are vulnerable in that space, and we always want to provide a safe space for that. So request to be a member. We will vet you. We'll let you in. You can be a part of the discussion. You can post show topics. You can share information. You can connect to other people. We love when you do that. Hey, in the meantime, you can also go to the website, go to matriarchdm.com, and you can check out the GynoCast page. We have previous episodes. We have the syllabus. We have all kinds of good information, and you can even email the show now. It's at hello at matriarch.com. Hello at matriarchdm.com. And that way you can get in touch with us and let us know what you think of the show and suggest topics and all of that other good stuff, too.
It's a world of wonder.
I know.
Just
it
here.
is.
Thank you for listening. We'll see you soon.